I found someone new. I'm divorcing someone as incompetent as you." As soon as our two-family house was finished, my husband declared this and tried to kick me out. I protested immediately against this cruel treatment. "Are you sure about this? Won't you regret it?" My husband laughed and replied, "I won't regret it," but a few months later, he contacted me on my cell phone. Imagining him suffering secretly brought me joy. "My name is Meryl Brown, and I am 32 years old. I am a housewife." My husband's name is Phil, and he is a 34-year-old office worker. We originally worked at the same company, and I immediately fell for the bright and cheerful Phil, leading to dating and eventually marriage. Before we married, I went to greet his parents, but it seemed his mother didn't like me very much. She opposed our marriage until the end, but Phil promised he would make me happy. A year has passed since our marriage. Right after we got married, Phil wanted me to be a housewife, so I accepted that. I had wanted children, thinking that being a housewife would allow me to care for them. However, since becoming a housewife, I found myself increasingly irritated by my husband's trivial actions. When that happened, I would immerse myself in my hobby of making handmade accessories to relieve stress. One day, we went to my in-laws' house. I didn't really like going there. The reason was because of my mother-in-law. She always criticized me harshly. According to my husband, she has a self-centered personality, but I felt uncomfortable with her behavior. As soon as we arrived at the in-laws' house, my mother-in-law threw a cold glance at me and questioned, "Still no children?" When I answered, "Not yet," she snorted and mocked me. "Incompetent and unable to have children, why did Phil marry a woman like you?" Receiving a provocative glance from my mother-in-law, I felt indignant enough to retort. However, I knew that reacting would not resolve anything, as it always had been like that. So I tried to suppress my anger. While feeling uncomfortable at my in-laws' house and wanting to leave soon, my husband made an unexpected remark. "I'm planning to build a two-family house. How about living together with my parents?" I was surprised by my husband's sudden suggestion. I had not heard of such a plan and argued against it, but my husband kept pushing the conversation forward. "My parents are getting old, and it will be tough for them to live alone from now on, so let's live together." My in-laws clearly looked pleased with my husband's words. Honestly, I was opposed to this idea. The thought of living with my selfish mother-in-law horrified me, but I hesitated to say something that would spoil the cheerful mood. As I showed a displeased expression, my mother-in-law immediately furrowed her brows and glared at me. "Meryl, what's with that displeased look? Are you opposed to living together?" "Hamph, honestly, I'm not keen on living with you either. But since Phil has suggested it for our benefit, you have no right to oppose, do you?" Her statement made me angry. "Do you have a complaint?" Since the head of the household, your husband, has decided a wife should obey. While saying this, my mother-in-law smirked. Seeing her like this made me worried. Finally, alone with Phil in the car on the way home, I confronted him. "There's no problem, right? I'm worried about my parents. We're getting along well, aren't we? Besides, it's a two-family house, so we'll hardly see each other." "It's not about that. Why didn't you consult me first? I wasn't informed about building the house or living together. I thought you would definitely oppose if I told you, so I kept quiet. Besides, you also said before that you wanted to live in a house, right? My salary has increased, and we have savings, so it's not a problem." I was stunned by Phil's thoughts. He seemed to feel nothing from my concerns and started talking about the new house. Even as I listened to him, I was not convinced in my heart. Especially The thought of having my mother-in-law in the house every day clearly made me anxious. I could easily foresee that if any problems arose, Phil would undoubtedly support his parents, which only made me feel worse. Months had passed since the house plan was revealed, and the situation was progressing steadily. I repeatedly told Phil that I was against it, but I couldn't persuade him. If we ended up living together, I would undoubtedly feel suffocated even while at home. Just thinking about it made my mood sink. Then one day, something happened on the way home from shopping. At dusk, I saw Phil, dressed in a suit, walking alone through a bustling street. It was at a time when he should have been at work, and I wondered why he was there. Feeling suspicious, I secretly followed him. "Sorry I'm late. Have you been waiting?" There, I witnessed it. The woman Phil rushed to was about my age. The woman beamed up at my husband and immediately took his arm, starting to walk through the crowd. Witnessing this unbelievable scene, I was shocked, but my mind remained clear. That night, I confronted him when he returned home late, showing him the photo I had taken on my phone. "What is this all about? Explain this to me." Phil's face clouded over, and he hesitantly began to speak. "My mother insisted that I meet her just once." "What?" "She seems to have decided that it's your fault we don't have children. She keeps telling me to divorce you." That was the first time I heard from Phil about his mother's scheme. She wanted to divorce us and remarry him to a woman she preferred. I was astonished and gasped at her outrageous plan. Certainly, every time we met, she had harsh words, but I didn't know she was pushing Phil to get a divorce as well. After hearing that story, I brought up the topic of the two-family house again. "We really can't build the house. Your mother hates me." As I said this with tears spilling, Phil apologized. Feeling that Phil, who did not even try to console me, was ultimately on his mother's side, hurt deeply. "Meryl, I'm not thinking of having an affair. This is just me temporarily complying to appease my mother. Please understand." Phil said this as he looked at me. Honestly, even if it was just his mother's opinion, I never wanted to feel this way again. But if I insisted on my feelings, it would only put him in a difficult position. Phil had also mentioned how he was frustrated with his mother's whims. After much deliberation, I made him promise not to cheat and reluctantly agreed to accept his mother's matchmaking arrangement. Phil repeatedly emphasized that he had no intention of divorcing me, so I decided to trust him. However, something that betrayed my trust occurred. "I've found someone new. I'm divorcing someone as incompetent as you." I was astounded by Phil's statement. Just before moving into the new house, I was left dumbfounded as my husband, Phil, began to explain his reasons. After that, I reconsidered everything. Living with my parents would threaten our peaceful everyday life because of the strained relationship between you and my mother. She will never accept you. However, during this time, the woman I met through matchmaking really pleased my mother. Seeing her talking happily with my mother made me realize this is what I was looking for. I was infuriated to the point that I even got a headache due to Phil's selfish reasoning. I had never imagined he would break his promise not to cheat. When I confronted him about it, to my surprise, he became defensive and started blaming me. "It's your fault. You never try to get along with my mother, and your attitude makes her aggressive. My mother really wants to get along with her daughter-in-law, to cook together and such. But because you refuse, her dream can never come true." My mother-in-law's words seemed clearly exaggerated. Although Phil understood his mother's selfishness, I was shocked that he believed such stories over what I said. "You are incompetent and can't earn money," my mother said. You made many mistakes back when you were still working, and I didn't want to make this choice, but if we can't show my mother a grandchild, then we should consider divorce. You're saying it's solely my fault we can't have children. It can't be helped. I can't think of having children with you. Maybe it's because you're not attractive enough. Phil's cruel words made both him and his mother's behavior beyond my comprehension. I was particularly unable to forgive him for prioritizing his mother's demands over the promises we made as a couple. The new bride, Betsy, is a kind woman, bright like the sun. My mother appreciates her bright personality and thoughtfulness. She told me she would approve our marriage with her, and hearing that made me happy. So please, Meryl, let's get a divorce. Phil said this while putting his hands together and pleadingly looking at me. I no longer felt any love for such a husband. I didn't need such a husband, it was time to end it. Rage boiled up from within me, a seething, burning feeling. But despite seeing how I felt, Phil continued with his self-centered statements. It seemed he was misunderstanding something. Where did he get the idea that I was incompetent and couldn't earn money? Anyway, I no longer felt like forgiving my husband. Are you sure about this? Won't you regret it? When I asked, Phil confidently answered, I won't regret it. You really are understanding. That's one thing I've always admired about you. He said this, praising me with a sense of superiority. I couldn't hide my anger any longer and shouted back. I'm done with a mama's boy like you. I've been patient for way too long. I can't take it anymore. Make sure you pay your fair share in the property division. Build your two-family house or whatever. It's no longer my concern. With tears, I went to get the divorce papers. It didn't matter anymore. No matter how much Phil might suffer from now on, I vowed not to lend him a hand. Phil clicked his tongue in irritation at my words. When I returned with the divorce papers, he looked at me expressionlessly. At that moment, a woman I didn't recognize was there. This is Betsy. Unlike you, she's beautiful and has class, Phil said proudly. I glanced at the woman named Betsy and snorted lightly. I don't care about that, just sign this quickly. I deliberately spoke provocatively as I held out the divorce papers for him to sign immediately. Since I had already packed my belongings for the move, I didn't have any trouble in that regard. You're going to have a hard time from now on, but don't come crying to me. I'll be taking care of Betsy and my family from now on. There's no way I'll be struggling. You'll be the one in trouble, won't you? What are you talking about? I make quite a lot of money. You manage the household finances and still don't understand. You really are incompetent. Despite his words, I just smiled. It became clear how much Phil was misunderstanding the situation. That's why, at that moment, I chose not to enlighten him. It seems you're making a big mistake, but by the time you realize it, it will be too late. What are you talking about? Phil looked at me very displeased. At that moment, his mother appeared. Isn't Phil's new wife wonderful? She's worlds apart from you. Hurry up and leave. It was clear that Phil and his mother would face difficult times ahead. Phil would eventually realize this fact. So I silently decided to leave the house. At the door, Phil watched coldly as I carried my bags out. I left the house without looking back. Several months later, I received 10 missed calls from my ex-husband. In my new apartment, looking at the screen of my cell phone, I smirked inwardly. Hello? Didn't I tell you not to call me directly and to go through my lawyer? Upon hearing that, my ex-husband started talking through tears on the other end of the phone. I've been in trouble ever since you left. I didn't know you were earning so much." It seems that my ex-husband had finally realized the truth, and in his panic he called me. Pretending not to know, I said to my ex-husband, "Huh, weren't you the one earning a lot?" Laughing as I spoke, my ex-husband burst into tears and shouted, "Forgive me." Internally, I thought to myself, serves him right. This was the misunderstanding my ex-husband had. I had started selling handmade accessories online as a hobby. Initially, I didn't sell many, but one day, a popular influencer on social media praised them, and sales soared to over $10,000 per month. My ex-husband didn't know the details of our finances because he had left all the management to me. I didn't think it was necessary to report to him, so I never shared the details. Since he began slacking off at work to go on dates, I had been covering living expenses with my income. When we divorced, he mistakenly believed that he was the one earning that amount. Realizing this, I left the house without saying a word. It's hard to understand why my ex-husband, a mere rank-and-file employee, believed he could earn so much each month. He probably assumed I was just doing household chores and immersing myself in my hobbies at home. Thus, he was convinced that all the income was earned by him. Since he used matchmaking as an excuse, he stopped doing overtime and started to splurge on lavish meals to impress others. However, under the guise of keeping my former mother-in-law reassured, I allowed it. When I asked you if you wouldn't regret it, remember what you said? I asked, and with a pained voice, my ex-husband replied, "Help me, I'm in trouble. My new wife doesn't work, and since moving in, my mom has been trying to make me pay all the living expenses. My dad is angry about our divorce and won't even speak to me. And I was under the impression that I was earning $10,000 a month. You know you can't possibly earn more than your fixed salary as a regular employee. You weren't doing any side jobs, and you were always going to matchmaking events instead of working overtime." I was wrong. Betsy, despite being a housewife, barely does any housework, and every time she goes shopping with my mother, they spend a lot of money. My mother really likes her and buys her all sorts of things that my salary can't possibly cover. Hearing my ex-husband's desperate cry, I was just dumbfounded. Sensing my reaction, my ex-husband raised his voice even more and pleaded. I decided to unleash all my pent-up frustrations on him. "By the way, what were you planning to do about your mother if we were to remarry? You used to say it wouldn't work because I couldn't get along with your mom." At that, my ex-husband suddenly fell silent, unable to say anything. I decided to press further. "I haven't forgotten what you said. Betsy is more considerate, and like the sun, you said. If your son makes everything brighter by buying all sorts of things, then that should be fine, right? I, who you no longer needed, left properly. What are you dissatisfied with? What? Are you sulking now? You used to love me. Since I started living with Betsy, I realized how much you were accommodating. Life has become poorer and more modest than when I was with you, but maybe if you came back, we could live like before." He began to speak with a hopeful voice. I was just dumbfounded by his attitude and could only sigh. "I'm surprised your accessories are so popular. I saw you making the same things every day and thought something was odd. Oh, and I still love you, you know? Ultimately, I can't think of anyone better than you." Hearing my ex-husband speak in such a wheedling tone made me shudder. I knew I had to refuse firmly, or he would keep pestering me with more calls. Just thinking about it made me feel sick. It's absurd. My feelings for you are a thing of the past. I have a new partner now, and I'm not even considering going back to you. By the way, I'm living comfortably in a spacious house out of state now. I don't have the stress from you, I'm freed from household chores, and I've started a business with my handmade accessories. It's going quite well. As my ex-husband continued to say unreasonable things, I decided to be a bit spiteful. Laughing sarcastically, I said, and he sounded frustrated. Surprised that I'm actually making a living from the accessories you belittled. I'm surprised too. So, no, I'm not thinking about remarrying you, and I have no intention of getting back together with you. Anything else? As I spoke calmly, my ex-husband stammered and showed his anger. Honestly, his shouts didn't affect me anymore. As his verbal abuse escalated, I made it clear. Make sure you pay your share of the property division, okay? After hearing those words, my ex-husband suddenly went silent and with a trembling voice, pleaded, "Please forgive me." Hearing that, I immediately hung up the phone. I don't want anything more to do with him. Afterwards, my ex-husband called several times, but I never answered. Eventually, the calls stopped, and I felt truly relieved to have finally severed the troublesome ties with him. It was also settled that my ex-husband would pay me the agreed portion of the property division. However, because most of his salary was being used by his new wife and mother-in-law, my ex-husband ended up having to take out loans to make the payments for the property division. Now, he is reportedly working day and night to pay off those debts. Meanwhile, my business selling handmade accessories is thriving, and I'm building a great relationship with my new partner, making every day fulfilling.
Hey, how are you doing? Where are you now? It had been a week since my husband and in-laws moved without saying a word to me. In such a situation, I received a phone call. Why do I have to tell you that? You're not smart. Why would you say that? You're really a noisy woman. I'll forgive you if you apologize. Moreover, if you do the housework, I might even give you a spare key. How about that? It's a nice proposal, isn't it? I naturally sighed at such an absurd proposal. Who do you think will do such a thing? What is someone incompetent like you talking about? Incompetent? Isn't that about yourselves? What? How dare you? I could tell my husband was talking to someone else on the phone. Huh? Oh, I see. That person was probably. Mom says she wants to talk. Before I could agree, it switched to my mother-in-law. Hello, can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you, but are you still alive? What are you talking about? Because you're jobless now, right? I'm listening carefully. You've been deceiving me, haven't you? What a disgraceful woman. My husband must have lied to his mother to maintain his dignity. Which one of us is more disgraceful? What should I do? Why are you silent? Say something. At that comment made my anger rapidly grew. Although it's rough, I decided to tell the truth to this ignorant old lady on the other end of the phone. The truth about my husband. You seem to be misunderstanding something. It's not me who was fired. Are you trying to add shame on top of shame? Isn't it you who should be embarrassed? What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. My mother-in-law seemed unable to hide her anger. I'm not joking. In fact, our comfortable life so far is thanks to me. Stop it. She was more stubborn than I thought, and it seemed she wouldn't understand. It seemed unlikely she would accept the truth as it was. At that moment, I made a decision. If that's the case, I'll divorce my incompetent, jobless husband. What? Do you really understand what you're saying? If you do that, you're the one who will suffer. Don't worry. You should be the ones worried. This is going nowhere. Before you hang up, why don't you verify that he was fired? After saying that, the call ended. About 5 minutes later, my husband called again, probably after hearing about it from his mother. However, I did not respond to the phone. From then on, they all will have to overcome even more challenges. And I waited for the right moment. Whether it worked or not, what my husband and his parents faced was not just simple hardship. My name is Anna. My siblings run a company inherited from our grandfather. My brother Peter is the president, and my sister Mandy is involved as a director. I myself manage several apartments inherited from my father. The rental income alone was enough to support myself. I met my husband, Kevin, when I was 33 years old. The connection was made through my sister, Mandy. Cess, isn't it about time you got married? How, why all of a sudden? Considering your age, I think it's about time. How can I get married without having a partner first? I'll take care of that. And a week later, my sister introduced me to Kevin, a friend from her college days. My first impression of him was that of a handsome young man with a neat appearance. Being work-focused all my life, I was at a loss for what to talk about. Well, you two have fun then. What, Mandy? Wait. My sister left with a laugh. And so, the two of us were left alone. Being a friend of my sister, he was younger than me. As the elder, I felt I had to act properly. Shall we go? Yes. Both of us, holding our nervousness, went to the first restaurant we saw. We ordered alcohol and immediately emptied our glasses. That helped us start to relax. I'm sorry about tonight. Mandy was a bit presumptuous. Don't worry about it. Honestly, I was looking forward to meeting you. Really? To tell you the truth, Mandy has been talking about you. I've been hearing about you since our university days. That girl. According to Kevin, Mandy had always spoken highly of me. After spending about 2 hours together, the evening came to an end. Then, see you again. Wait a minute. If you don't mind, can we exchange contact information? Oh, right. We haven't done that yet. And so, we exchanged contact information and started to go on dates frequently. So, when are you planning to get married, sis? Not anytime soon. Really? How long have you two been seeing each other? Well, about 6 months. Then it should be fine, shouldn't it? Don't talk about it as if it's someone else's business. In fact, a week after being introduced by Mandy, Kevin confessed his feelings to me. I was surprised, but it wasn't unpleasant. And I accepted his confession. 6 months passed. Although I had a desire to get married, I hesitated to bring it up. Being older, I worried whether bringing up the topic would be too much pressure. On a certain day, while pondering these thoughts, I want to talk about something important today. Understood. Let's meet at our usual place after work. See you then. That call came during my lunch break, and I couldn't concentrate on my afternoon tasks. Naturally, that was the expected reaction. It's impossible to remain indifferent to such a conversation. That day, he proposed to me. I was somewhat prepared, but being asked to consider marriage made me question if I was the right person. So, what's your answer, Anna? I'll say yes. However, what followed wasn't straightforward. Next, we had to greet each other's families. My parents warmly accepted our marriage. Next was meeting Kevin's parents. But what should we do about greeting Kevin's family? About that. Yes, Kevin seemed somewhat downhearted, as if he didn't want to go there. There's something I need to tell you. Actually, I want to keep your job a secret. Why is that? My father doesn't mind, but my mom. According to Kevin, his mother-in-law had an unusually strong sense of pride and wouldn't accept a wife earning more than her husband. It seems that his late grandmother was also like that, and she firmly inherited that mindset. So please, I'd appreciate it if you could manage the conversation well. Kevin requested that from me. Faced with such a request, I couldn't refuse, but I was still worried. I understand keeping it a secret, but can we keep hiding it forever? I think it'll be okay. He didn't provide details at the time, but I had no choice but to trust his words. and we scheduled a visit to my in-laws' house a week later. Aren't you worried? A bit nervous, yes. I'll be by your side. And remember what we planned. Got it. When the doorbell rang, my mother-in-law greeted us. Good of you to come. Please come in. Thank you. As we were led into the living room where my father-in-law was sitting. Glad you could make it. Have a seat. Thank you. I caught a glimpse of Kevin's tension at that moment. We came to talk about something special. We're considering getting married together. Is that so? Anna, what do you do for a living? As expected, the question came. This inquiry was anticipated. According to our plan, I was to say that I work in an administrative position through a temp agency. In reality, it wasn't a complete lie, as I occasionally help out at my brother's company. That decision was made for such reasons. I'm currently working in an administrative role. I see. What do you think, Dad? If it's an administrative job, there shouldn't be a problem. Then it's okay to get married, right? Yes, I have no objections. Thank you. While exchanging conversations, I excused myself to the bathroom halfway through, and on my way back to the living room. Wait a moment. I was approached by my mother-in-law. Yes, what is it? It was the moment I had hoped to avoid. What is that? Which one? That expensive-looking item you're wearing. She was pointing at the necklace I was wearing. Oh, this is. As you'll be a wife from now on, such things are unnecessary. Take it off here. Excuse me? Shall I help you? My mother-in-law tried to forcefully remove my necklace. No, I can take it off myself. Saying so, I removed the necklace. This necklace was originally a gift from Kevin for my birthday. I tried to explain this several times, but it seemed to my mother-in-law like nothing but excuses. Also, change that outfit. Too much leg exposure. It's unpleasant. Why must I be criticized like this? As I was confused, Kevin came and asked what was happening. What's going on? It just took a bit longer. I'll be back soon. Okay, got it. My mother-in-law cut off my response. Remember what I just said. Don't forget it. I'll come by to check occasionally. Your response? Yes, I understand. I couldn't refuse. I was just exhausted from being compliant. Though I returned to the living room, I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I wanted to avoid saying anything unnecessary and being criticized again. Something happened? No, nothing. I blamed someone in my mind for how I felt, but I couldn't hold Kevin responsible. All I felt was a desire to leave this place as soon as possible. I don't remember the details of the conversation that followed. Somehow, we reached an agreement and returned to Kevin's house. First, let's start by finding a place to live together. Yes, that sounds good. We visited various properties together, but I couldn't forget the words of my mother-in-law. Before I knew it, the property was contracted in my name. At that time, I never thought this would become a big problem later on. Thus, we got married and became a couple. However, the smooth marriage life was only at the beginning. Anyway, let's keep this from my mom going forward. Can this really work out? It'll be fine. Kevin's baseless confidence only fueled my anxiety. And that anxiety became reality. As much as possible, we tried to avoid contact with my mother-in-law, but one day, a month after getting married, I came home from work to an unexpected visit from her. Mother, why are you here? Just came to see how you two are doing. But what were you doing at this late hour? I was at work. You're supposed to be in an administrative job, aren't you? Yet, you come home this late. I looked at Kevin and he gestured for me to deny it. It seemed he meant to keep this fact hidden. There was a bit of overtime today. Making excuses. You were actually out having fun, weren't you? I wasn't out having fun. Really? Mom, that's enough. But anyway, we're doing fine without any problems. With those words, my mother-in-law seemed convinced and left without further comment. I'm sorry. I didn't expect my mom to come. Maybe we should tell her the truth? It's okay. Leave it to me. But this means we're continuing with the lie. It's fine like this. Don't make me repeat myself. Was it necessary for me to be told this? Despite being newly married, my trust in Kevin began to waver. However, there was one good thing. Kevin's approach worked, and the visits from my mother-in-law stopped. At least, it was a temporary relief. Until I noticed something suspicious one day at noon. Huh? Why are Kevin's shoes here? Hesitantly, I stepped inside. At that moment, I saw Kevin lounging on the sofa, sipping on alcohol. What are you doing? Hoops, surprised, he dropped a beer can he was holding onto the floor. Inna, why are you here? I came back to pick up something I forgot. What happened to work? I wasn't feeling well, so I came home early. I see, but you're drinking, so you must have recovered? Well, they say alcohol is a cure-all. But it looks like you've had quite a bit? There were already 6 empty beer cans lined up on the table. Moderation is key, right? I think drinking too much isn't good. Kevin didn't respond. I remembered the document I had forgotten and headed to the bedroom. Glancing at the living room casually, I saw Kevin, despite my caution, now drinking whiskey. Try to cut back a little. How? Aren't you running out of time? That's right. I'll hear the details when I get back. Take care. Actually, I wanted to ask in detail right there, but as Kevin said, I was running out of time. Is something bothering you? No, not really. My siblings said you seemed a bit down. Sorry, it's really nothing. Are you in any trouble, Kevin? Does it seem that way? Kind of. It's the only thing I could think of. I was at a loss for words. First, I'll focus on work. Yeah, that's probably best. After work, I met up with my siblings to talk about the recent events then. So, what's specifically bothering you? Well, actually, don't worry. This stays between us, so feel free to open up. Thanks. I opened up to my siblings about the situation with my mother-in-law and Kevin's recent behavior. That's unexpected. What? Sorry, I can't believe it. I didn't think it was that serious. It's not your fault, Mandy. But what will you do now? Should I say something? That might make things worse. Didn't we promise to keep it a secret? Yeah, but knowing they were so considerate warmed my heart. First, I'll try to talk directly to the involved parties. That sounds right. We're here to support you whenever you need. I appreciate it, thank you. After that exchange, I returned home, but I couldn't find Kevin anywhere. All the alcohol was neatly cleaned up. Where could he have gone? I tried to contact him, but there was no response. Kevin returned the next morning. Where were you? Actually, I went to my parents' house. My mom called me over suddenly, Kevin said, laughing. What's so funny? Huh? Not answering your phone and being at your parents' house, really? Couldn't you have at least contacted me? Why would you say something like that? Why don't you ask my mom? Don't say such ridiculous things. With work looming, I hurriedly left the house. As soon as I got to work, I received a call from my mother-in-law. Yes, hello? What have you done? I'm not sure what you're referring to. I heard you doubted Kevin. Since I couldn't reach him, I was just to get so upset over such a trivial matter. You're really narrow-minded. The call continued with my mother-in-law showering me with insults. Eventually, she even called me incompetent. I couldn't bear it any longer and ended up retorting. There's no reason for me to be criticized like this. What are you talking about? So, please, stop this pointless conversation. I have work waiting for me. I immediately hung up the phone and took a deep breath. My patience paid off, and I felt a pleasant sense of release. Returning home after a day's work and feeling a sense of accomplishment, I was greeted with criticism by Kevin. I heard you said something terrible to my mom? I didn't say anything terrible. I just stated the obvious. That's not a joke. Why do you belittle people's parents like that? If you didn't act suspiciously, there wouldn't be any problem in the first place, would there? Fine. If you're going to say that, I have my own plan. Afterward, Kevin made a call as if he was enjoying something. Once the call ended, he announced, "Look forward to it." The change came 3 days later. What is this? I was utterly stunned as boxes piled up in the room. Confused and bewildered, Kevin returned with my in-laws. Seeing me, Kevin said with a laugh, "Why such a face? Didn't I tell you to look forward to it? Let's live together from now on." At that moment, everything clicked. Kevin had arranged for us to live together behind my back. That call was indicating his plan. Isn't this method too authoritarian? Why would you think that? Kevin proposed this cohabitation thinking of us. He's really considerate. But there are no available rooms. That's strange. Kevin said there were 2 empty rooms. Those 2 empty rooms were reserved for future children, not for living with my in-laws. But with their belongings already moved in, there was nothing I could do. From that day on, my life changed drastically. Is breakfast ready? We don't prepare it so early in our house. That doesn't concern us. From that day, I started waking up at 4 a.m., and that was just the beginning. Eventually, a specific event led me to vet revenge against Kevin and his family. House chores naturally fell to me, not by choice, but because they would be neglected otherwise. Feeling this situation was unsustainable, I consulted with my siblings again. What's going on? That's unbelievable. Don't worry, leave it to us. My siblings rushed from their workplace directly to our house. Their purpose was to speak directly to Kevin and his parents. "Oh, Peter and Mandy too, what brings you here? We heard you've been quite freewheeling." That's not true. Really? Deciding to live together without asking and dumping all household chores on Anna? That's a misunderstanding. There might have been a slight difference in perception, but I'll resolve this issue. I'll explain to my parents. So, it's like that. Is this matter settled then? Despite relying on my siblings, I didn't want to burden them further. It's fine. All right, then we're counting on you. That day, my in-laws were out, and it's unclear how the situation would have unfolded had they been home. Really unnecessary. If you had acted properly from the start, we wouldn't be in this situation. Relying on your siblings, aren't you ashamed? As Kevin and I were arguing, my in-laws returned. "Why are you talking so loudly? The whole neighborhood can hear you." Actually, Anna reported us to her siblings. Reported? She's making us out to be problematic. A wife doing such a thing. But the problem originates from you. Forcing cohabitation and dumping chores on me, right? That's natural and there's no problem at all. It seems you need to be educated. At that moment, Kevin seemed to be contemplating something. Causing more trouble would be a hassle. I've got a good idea. After he whispered something to my mother-in-law, she said, "That's a good idea. Your brothers run a company, right?" "Yes, what about it?" "What if disgraceful rumors about that company were to spread? In the worst case, the company might not survive." "What are you planning to do?" "Something like this." Kevin then showed me his smartphone screen. On the screen, there were baseless allegations about my brother's company. "If you listen to us, we'll leave this information as it is. But if you pull another stunt, you're going to make this public?" "Exactly. Understand this and don't repeat such actions." It was clearly a threat. To protect my siblings' safety, I had no choice but to comply with their demands. However, Kevin's actions went beyond mere threats. One day, when my mother-in-law was absent, the truth was revealed. "You must have noticed, but I've quit my job." "Is that really a path you chose yourself?" "Why do you ask that?" "Just curious." "It's not important anyway." "Actually, I was fired." "What caused it?" "Let's not dwell on the details. There were various issues." I felt I had learned something significant from his answer. "But don't ever mention this to my parents." "Why not?" "You should understand why." "What's the plan going forward?" Kevin just fell silent. "No choice, I have to handle it. As usual." You might have forgotten, but I'm the one paying the rent and living expenses. Just don't do anything unnecessary. Half a year passed, and I had become nothing but a servant to Kevin and his family. I could only despair about when this situation would end. That day, I had an important meeting, so I headed to my brother's workplace. The meeting lasted late into the night, and I didn't get home until after 8 p.m. As soon as I arrived, I immediately noticed something was wrong. Everything was too quiet. The moment I stepped inside, I was struck silent by the scene before me. It was evident the house was empty. Checking room by room, all our belongings were gone. I collapsed on the spot. I immediately called my siblings. Is something wrong? I need you to come to my house right away. Understood? I'm on my way. 30 minutes later, my brother and sister arrived. What in the world happened? Nothing's left. It seems everyone decided to move out without me knowing. How did it come to this? What's that? Did you find something? Yes, something's on the table. Really? What my brother found seemed to be a note left by Kevin. The note read, "For us, you are no longer necessary. Hence, we've decided to move. We've taken the money in the dresser with gratitude." The money in the dresser. Rushing to check the bedroom dresser, the money I had hidden was all gone. It's gone. Everything's been taken. About $10,000 was missing. I made a mistake. I never thought the hiding spot would be discovered. What's our next step? Faced with that question from my brother, I had no immediate answer. But my sister's remark provided a new perspective. But why such actions? What benefit does this bring? What do you mean? This situation essentially forces a divorce, doesn't it? That's it. Exactly. Huh? Thank you. Huh? Oh, sure. With Kevin and my in-laws gone, this situation turned into a significant turning point for me. Why are you so pleased? It's kind of scary. Can we talk for a bit? So, I began to share my plans for the future with them. The details concern me, but if you have decided on this, Anna, I think it's fine. It's odd for me to say this since I introduced Kevin, but I want you to go ahead with all your might. At that point, I avoided contacting them directly. Considering their nature, I expected some form of communication from them. So, I adopted a wait-and-see approach. A week after they left, "Hey, have you been well?" As expected, I received a call from Kevin. "Hey, how are you doing? Where are you now?" It had been a week since my husband and in-laws moved without telling me a word. In such a situation, I received a phone call. Huh? Why do I have to tell you that? You're not smart. Why would you say that? You're really a noisy woman. I'll forgive you if you apologize. Moreover, if you do the housework, I might even give you a spare key. How about that? It's a nice proposal, isn't it? I naturally sighed at such an absurd proposal. Who do you think will do such a thing? What is someone incompetent like you talking about? Incompetent? Isn't that about yourselves? What? How dare you? I could tell my husband was talking to someone else on the phone. Huh? Oh, I see. That person was probably. Mom says she wants to talk. Before I could agree, my mother-in-law started speaking. Hello, can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you, but... Are you still alive? How, what are you talking about? Because you're jobless now, right? You've been deceiving me, haven't you? What a disgraceful woman. My husband must have lied to his mother to maintain his dignity. Which one of us is more disgraceful? What should I do? Why are you silent? Say something. At that comment, my anger rapidly grew. Although it's rough, I decided to tell the truth to this ignorant old lady on the other end of the phone. The truth about my husband. You seem to be misunderstanding something. It's not me who was fired. Are you trying to add shame on top of shame? Isn't it you who should be embarrassed? What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. My mother-in-law seemed unable to hide her anger. I'm not joking. In fact, our comfortable life so far is thanks to me. Stop it. She was more stubborn than I thought, and it seemed she wouldn't understand. It seemed unlikely she would accept the truth as it was. At that moment, I made a decision. If that's the case, I'll divorce my incompetent, jobless husband. Huh? Do you really understand what you're saying? If you do that, you're the one who will suffer. Don't worry. You should be the ones worried. This is going nowhere. Before you hang up, why don't you verify that he was fired? After saying that, the call ended. About 5 minutes later, my husband called again, probably after hearing about it from his mother. However, I did not respond to the phone. From then on, they all will have to overcome even more challenges. And I waited for the right moment. Whether it worked or not, what my husband and his parents faced was not just simple hardship. A month passed, and I received another call from Kevin. Needless to say, I had been making various preparations during that month. There's nothing to talk about. Wait a minute, can't we live together? Why? Why, you ask? Let me guess. It's surely about money, right? Absolutely not. It's your own responsibility for leaving. Well, good luck. Don't say that. We're still a couple. You've heard from your mother, right? I intend to divorce you. What? Anyway, that's the situation. Don't contact me anymore. I thought it was over, but it wasn't that simple. The next day, Kevin came to my house with his parents. Back again? That's not all. I've heard everything from Kevin. And what about it? I'm truly sorry. Hey, Kevin, apologize too. I'm really sorry. Can we start over from the beginning? As if there's such a convenient story. I understand that. Still, I'm asking. How foolish. No matter how much they apologize, I have no intention of forgiving. I'm sorry, but I can't. Please leave. Now we won't be able to make a living. But you took the money from the house, right? Don't tell me you've spent it all. All gone due to the move and such. I could only laugh. I have something for you. Just a moment. How what? I went to the living room, picked something up, and came back to the entrance. Here, take this. What I handed to Kevin was a divorce application. This is, as you can see, it's a divorce application. There's no way this will go through. While saying that, Kevin tore it up. Do you understand what you're doing, Kevin? A divorce is out of the question. Well, that's one option. I was planning to consult a lawyer anyway. Can you leave now? The conversation isn't over. Either way, we can't live together if you keep making a scene. Let's send it here for today. Wait a minute. Urged by his parents, Kevin left. I immediately went to consult a lawyer introduced by my brother. There were still necessary steps to conclude this. I'm really grateful. Thank you. So, is there no problem anymore? No. It's safer to proceed with the divorce through a lawyer. But I have a request. If there's anything I can do, just ask. Actually, afterward, I asked my brother to help me find a new place to live. I heard one of his friends was in real estate. I quickly completed the contract for the new place and finished moving. Naturally, I didn't contact Kevin at all. There was no need to, after all. Once this situation arose, it was inevitable that Kevin would contact me. Did you go to the house? Where are you now? There's no reason for me to tell you. I had Mandy inquire about Kevin and his family's situation. They were still unemployed and living with his parents. This situation forced his parents to start looking for work. But I couldn't imagine that stubborn mother-in-law actually working. Also, I heard you still haven't found any job. Why would you? I won't say. What? Also, tell your mother to keep at it. Well, goodbye. Kevin and his family were facing even more challenging times ahead. As for myself, I was enjoying a free life in my new home. Moreover, our family has grown. I started keeping a chihuahua, something I've longed for. For me, this small family is enough. From now on, I will spend my time with this beloved dog.
Get out of here." These cold words were uttered by my mother-in-law, Grace. As soon as my husband's overseas assignment was confirmed, she kicked me and my daughter out of the house. With nowhere to live, I took my 2-year-old daughter to the park. As I was overwhelmed thinking about what to do next, I was suddenly surrounded by police officers. "Please come with us to the station." Trembling in the pouring rain, I followed the officer's instructions and headed to the police station. There, an unexpected person was waiting. "My name is Olive. I turned 35 this year. I met my husband, Jim, at work, and we got married a year after we started dating. I quit my job when we got married, and 2 years ago, I gave birth to our daughter, Tracy. Currently, I live with Jim, Tracy, and my mother-in-law, Grace. We originally lived in a rental property, but when my father-in-law passed away and Grace's knee condition worsened, we decided to live together and bought a new apartment. We considered buying a house, but given Grace's knee condition, a location with good transportation was deemed best. Apartments are less expensive than houses, and life with an elevator became easier, so Grace agreed with this choice. As a result, we made a down payment and took out a 35-year mortgage. Jim's company is known for its frequent business trips and transfers, but we were told that there would be no relocation for the time being since we had recently bought the house. However, Jim's frequency of business trips is higher compared to other employees, and he travels to other states once a week. I am raising a 2-year-old daughter, and honestly, it gets stressful when Jim goes on business trips. Initially, Grace was cooperative, but now she hardly helps with childcare and instead adds more trouble. For example, she leaves dishes on the table after meals or leaves cooking utensils unsoaked. I'm busy taking care of Tracy, and before I know it, rice grains are stuck to the dishes, making them difficult to clean. When I ask Grace to at least soak the dishes in water, she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'll be more careful next time." However, she doesn't actually follow through. Strangely, when Jim is home, Grace does soak the dishes properly. I only recently noticed this because there were occasional times when she would soak the dishes, so I thought it was fine, but now my thinking has changed. Grace is likely harassing me on purpose. Also, when going shopping, if I ask, "Do you need anything?" she responds, "No, I don't need anything special right now." But when I get home, she says, "Actually, I need something for tomorrow's hospital visit." This doesn't happen just occasionally, it's quite frequent. Grace has bad knees and moving is difficult for her, so I wanted to support her as much as possible, but lately, my willingness to help has been waning. I've considered discussing this issue with Jim. However, considering how busy he is with work, I feel reluctant to burden him further. Grace's harassment began not long after we started living together and has been going on for several years. When I confided in a friend about this issue, she advised, "That sounds like typical mother-in-law bullying. If it's tough, why don't you talk to your husband? He might be able to do something." I was concerned that if I brought up the issue with Jim, the lonely Grace might end up in a facility. Initially, I thought enduring this might be better for Grace. However, a certain event later changed my mind. That day, I was supposed to leave Tracy at my parents' house. My parents adore Tracy and sometimes have her stay over. "Thank you always. We always look forward to you bringing Tracy over." Really, that's true. "Why don't you stay over too, Olive?" "I'd love to stay, but I'm worried about leaving Grace alone, so I'll go home today. I'll come to pick her up tomorrow. Please don't buy her too many toys." After a delightful time, I decided to head back to the apartment where Grace was. Upon returning to the apartment, I realized something significant. I realized I had forgotten the house keys. Despite forgetting the keys, I assumed Grace was at home, so I decided to use the intercom to call her. I entered the apartment number and called, but there was no response. Maybe she's gone out. With that thought, I decided to wait outside the building for a while. However, there was no sign of Grace returning. About 2 hours passed. It was after 7 p.m., and it had become completely dark outside. Fortunately, I saw other residents returning home, so I waited for the auto lock to open and followed them into the entrance. It was rare for Grace to go out late at night, so I was certain she must be at home, and I pressed the room intercom again. The intercom rang, but still, there was no response. After waiting at the door for a while, I heard a click from inside. That sound meant Grace must be inside. I pressed the intercom several times, but Grace did not respond in the end. Eventually, I spent the night at a nearby business hotel and decided to return home the next day when Jim came back from his business trip. "Oh, what happened? Did you go shopping?" "Actually." That's when I decided to confess to Jim that I had been kicked out of the house by Grace. Jim was angry on my behalf, but Grace, pretending to be hard of hearing, said, "Oh, is that so?" I couldn't hear very well, while seemingly trying to suppress a laugh. Finally, after entering the house, I took the keys and went to pick up Tracy, who was staying with my parents. When I explained the situation to my parents, they said, "That's clearly harassment. If it gets too tough, you can always come back home." "Really, you can always come back to us," my parents said, offering words of encouragement. I couldn't help but tear up at my parents' words, but since Tracy was there, I quickly wiped away the tears and returned home. For a while after that, there was no harassment from Grace. However, the peaceful days didn't last long, as suddenly Jim's overseas transfer was decided. "A transfer? Isn't it just a business trip?" "Yeah, I can't believe it's an overseas transfer just after we bought the house. What should we do? I think it's better for you and Tracy to stay in the US, but can you get along with Mom?" I couldn't answer Jim's question immediately. However, considering that living abroad could be stressful for Tracy, I decided that my daughter and I should stay in the US. Shortly after the overseas transfer was confirmed, Jim departed for Japan. He was worried about us, but perhaps because he was busy with work, he didn't have much time to think about us. And so, a new life began for Tracy, Grace, and me. As expected, living with Grace did not go smoothly. Her attitude changed completely right after Jim left. On that day, a hurricane was approaching, and it was raining heavily outside. It was a dangerous downpour that made it difficult to go outside. Amidst this, Grace made an unbelievable suggestion. "Now that Jim has gone overseas, could you please leave this place?" "What do you mean?" "Just that. I will take over this house, so you don't need to stay here anymore. I can't relax with other people around. Please leave soon." I was shocked and doubted my ears. Indeed, we are not related by blood. But I had tried my best to live comfortably with each other, and I had treated myself as a member of the family. However, perhaps to Grace, we were just insignificant. As time is passing while we talk, please leave quickly." Urged by her, Tracy and I were hastily kicked out of the house. No matter how many times I knocked on the door, Grace did not respond. Desperate and holding Tracy tight, I walked to the nearby park in the pouring rain. The park had a roof, so I thought it might provide some shelter from the rain. Ideally, staying at a business hotel or going back to my parents' house would be best, but I had left my wallet and smartphone at home. Sitting in the park, I deeply contemplated what to do next. I had no idea how much time had passed in the torrential rain. Amid the freezing cold, sleepiness began to overtake me. The sky was getting darker, and despite it being summer, I feared I might catch a cold if things continued this way. The situation was dire, but I had no choice but to walk to my parents' house. However, it would take about 3 hours on foot to get there. As I pondered what to do, I saw 2 lights approaching from a distance. Thinking that asking for help might resolve the situation, I was about to call out when a police officer spoke to me first. "Are you Olive? And is this your daughter Tracy?" Surprised that the police officer knew my name, I weakly responded, "Yes, that's correct." The officer said, "Could you please come to the station?" I wondered why I needed to go to the police station, but it seemed there was a reason. Following the officer's urging, I got into the patrol car. Tracy and I were shivering from being out in the rain for a long time, but the officer had prepared large towels for us. "These might not be enough, but please use them. We have clothes for you to change into once we get to the station." He kindly handled the situation. Wondering why the police knew about me and why we were being taken to the station, I asked, "Why do we need to go to the station?" However, he replied, "I'll explain the details once we get to the station. Please rest for now." Hearing this, and reaching my limit of fatigue, I realized upon waking that we had already arrived at the station. Following the officer inside, I saw Grace and my uncle there. "Uncle, why are you here?" Jim asked me to. He was worried that Grace might be giving you a hard time while he's abroad, so he asked me to keep an eye on things. According to my uncle, Jim had been concerned about this issue for a while, and, unable to address it from overseas, had asked him to monitor the situation. Today, after spotting me in the rain, my uncle deemed the situation abnormal and called the police. My uncle informed the police of our location, and they came to pick us up. Grace was also asked to come to the police station. Sitting on the sofa, Grace looked at us unhappily. "Why do I need to be here? My knees are bad. None of this would have happened if Jim were here," she complained, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the situation. Grace had her perspective, but this was something Jim had arranged through my uncle. After consulting with the police, it was determined that the incident could have legal implications. The suggestion that a lawyer should be hired was also raised. "A lawyer? Isn't that a bit much? All I did was lock the door. I didn't do anything else." "Do you really understand the severity of what you've done? You threw out Olive and her young child into a torrential rain. That's not acceptable." My uncle stood up for us. He then revealed, actually, Olive is the owner of the house. That can't be right. Jim, the head of the house, is the owner. Now that Jim is gone, I'm the owner. Grace still believed Jim was the owner, but that wasn't the case. In fact, my uncle deals in real estate, and through his connections, we were able to buy the apartment at a good price. Because it was a transaction among relatives, Jim had advised that the property be put in my name. Initially, I didn't mind either way, but now I'm grateful for Jim's suggestion. Afterward, I hired a lawyer introduced by my uncle to proceed with consultations. According to the lawyer, it would be difficult to make Grace leave. Therefore, if we need to distance ourselves from Grace in the future, the best advice was to place her in a facility. Having learned this, I immediately called Jim to explain the situation. Jim had not expected the situation to escalate this far and said he would return to the U.S. to discuss it thoroughly. He is also considering the possibility of placing Grace in a facility. Meanwhile, for some reason, Grace was inside the police station, unconcerned and eating donuts. Since we cannot continue living with Grace, Tracy and I decided to temporarily take refuge at my parents' house until Jim returns. Jim will return from Japan in a week, so we need to decide our next steps during that time. If Jim does not support me, divorce may become one of the options. During this time, I regretted not sharing the problem sooner. 1 week later, Jim returned from Japan. Since he was at home with Grace, I moved back from my parents' house to our home. Jim had to return to Japan urgently, so he could only stay in the U.S. for a few days. During this short time, we needed to discuss what to do. I heard from Uncle, but is that really true? That's not true at all. It's all made up. I haven't done anything, and Olive is trying to get rid of me. Grace did not want to admit any fault and accused me of trying to oust her. Jim seemed to be listening to Grace's side while considering my position. Understood. But do you have any concrete evidence that Olive is trying to do something? Evidence? There's no such thing. I see. Do you have any evidence, Olive? Honestly, I haven't been very attentive to the family because of my work. That's why I can't immediately believe anyone's words. I'm sorry. To that, I handed him something. What is this? What I handed to him was a voice recorder that I always carry with me. I had been recording Grace's remarks on this voice recorder on a regular basis. Not only the incident when she kicked me out, but also her usual verbal abuse was recorded on it. When Jim played the voice recorder, Grace's voice came through, saying, "Truly a useless daughter-in-law. Why did Jim ever marry such a woman?" Hearing this, Grace hurriedly began to make excuses. This is different. Doesn't everyone get irritated sometimes? I was just in a bad mood at that moment. That's all it was. Grace claimed this, but the voice recorder continued to play more of her abusive language. There were so many instances of abuse that not all of them had been recorded. As the audio played, Jim's hands were shaking as he held the voice recorder. Grace had a clearly disturbed expression on her face. "Mom, what is all this about?" Despite hearing Jim's question, Grace remained silent. Your silence means you admit this is true, right? Then, I have a responsibility to protect Olive and Tracy. You understand that, don't you? I had never seen Jim angry before. Confronted with Jim's anger, Grace was frightened and stood there speechless. Before Jim returned to the U.S., several discussions took place. I firmly argued that it was impossible for me to live with Grace in the future. I couldn't bear the possibility of such situations happening again, especially not with Tracy's safety at stake. Jim agreed on this point and considered placing Grace in a facility. However, Grace strongly objected to being placed in a facility, and the discussions were difficult. That's fine, but I've decided to sell the house. So you can't live here. If you don't go to the facility, you'll need to find somewhere else to live. How dare you decide this on your own? I won't allow you to sell the house. Grace was opposed to selling the house, but it was an unacceptable demand. This was because Tracy and I had decided to move with Jim to Japan. Jim regretted not having spent enough time with his family and promised to value our time together more from now on. Although there was some resistance to living abroad, having Jim by our side provided a sense of security. Moreover, for Tracy, who is only 2 years old, it would be a great opportunity to learn a new language in a new environment. Therefore, we had no choice but to sell the apartment, which still had a mortgage remaining. We could have kept it, but I couldn't leave the mortgage payments to Grace. She was living on a pension, and considering her future needs, she thought she needed someone else's support. Grace was not convinced until the end, but we decided to place her in a facility almost forcibly. Jim said, "I'm sorry, but I need to return to Japan. Could you handle the procedures in the US?" And then he went back to Japan. With support from those around me, I completed the procedures to place Grace in the facility. Grace regularly receives updates from the facility, but she seems to be quite down. Not only is she lacking energy, but she also tends to cause trouble with other residents, making things complicated. Before heading to Japan, I visited the facility to see Grace, and she vehemently criticized me, saying, "I can't forgive you for locking me up in a place like this." She also continuously complained to the staff, "This food is inedible. Serve something decent. The portions are too small, the bed is uncomfortable, and the treatment from others is terrible. Staying here will drive me insane." When I apologized to the staff, they reassured me, "It's okay. These kinds of reactions are common and there's no need to worry. Please leave her care to us. We will keep you updated regularly, and if there is any need, we will contact you immediately." The staff were extremely kind. Despite the hardships I faced with Grace, I felt some affection for her due to our past life together, and it was with concern that I departed for Japan. Upon arriving in Japan, Jim, who was waiting at the airport, and I went to the apartment we had rented. Living costs in Japan are said to be high, but thanks to a housing allowance from Jim's company, we were able to find a reasonably spacious and affordable apartment. The residents of the apartment are very friendly and have been kind to me despite my limited Japanese. Yesterday, a neighbor shared some homemade beef and potato stew with me, so in return, I gave them some mac and cheese that I cooked. Mac and cheese is not very well known in Japan, but it seems they really liked it. Tracy and I are gradually learning Japanese. Since self-study has its limits, we are also attending a language school. There are many other American people at the school, including many who have just arrived in Japan. I've made new friends there, and I'm enjoying life in Japan. Now that I no longer need to worry about Grace, I can fully enjoy meals out with friends, which was difficult before. While I am slowly getting used to our new life, I won't be completely at ease until Tracy starts kindergarten. In Japan, children generally start kindergarten at the age of 3, so I hope to have her learn Japanese by then. Fortunately, Tracy has a good learning ability and is gradually picking up Japanese. By the time Tracy starts kindergarten, I am also hoping to start working. Jim has said he's fine with me being a stay-at-home mom, but through our new life in Japan, I've been inspired to further myself. Living amidst Japan's rich culture has boosted my self-esteem and made me want to discover new aspects of myself. I've become friends with the staff at a local cafe, and they've invited me to work with them. The cafe is popular with American customers, but many local patrons are also studying English. Life in Japan might still present challenges, but Jim has become more proactive in communication. I've also become better at expressing my own opinions, and I believe we can overcome any difficulties as a family. Currently, I feel the happiest I've ever been in my life.